This is a special broadcast, a very special episode of the Urban Debate. We have over the years constantly spoken about mental health and the importance of mental health, and to understand the various kinds of illnesses that may be there, to understand depression, to understand clinical suicidal depression, and to talk about it. Mirror Now has always held conversations because we want more and more people to talk about mental health. We believe that's the only way we can begin to tackle this one huge issue in our country today. We don't even realize how widespread it is. We will talk about mental well-being because in times of a pandemic, in times of an economic recession, when the whole world and our lifestyles are changing the way they are, it becomes even more essential to not just take care of our physical health, but also to take care of our mental health. Tonight, we launch a campaign by Times Network that we are calling Act Now. And we're going to continue with this with multiple conversations, including you, including experts on our channel, on social media. We want more and more people to be aware, more and more people to be able to talk and to act. Because often our first simple reaction to when we hear somebody give in, give up, or take the decision to take their own life is that, oh, we didn't realize that person was going through something. That person looked so normal. That person looked happy. It didn't look like he had a mental health issue. He probably just had an attitude problem. He was just sad all day, just lonely all day. We don't understand depression. We don't read the signs properly. We often say things that are wrong and detrimental to those who may be experiencing it. And we don't act on time. So our effort and our intent is to spread the message so that we act now. We act when we see somebody in trouble. We've prepared a special message for all our viewers. I want to play out that message for you before we go across and bring you an exhaustive survey that we've done that will only validate the point that I'm making tonight. But first, watch this.
It's okay, man. Crying is good.
You missed the best night ever, bhaiya.
He's been super weird lately.
Beta, it's just a phase.
Think of those who have it worse than you.
Learn to enjoy life, my boy.
You need to snap out of it, honey.
क्या हो गया? It's so sudden.
It's never sudden. It's time to act now.
Before I move on and get you the details of the Times Network Nielsen perception study that we've conducted, I want to just say good evening to the panelists who are joining us on this special broadcast. I'm so glad that we have Ritika Agarwal, consultant psychologist at Jasloke Hospital and Research Center, joining us this evening. Dr. Marcus Rane, champion of well-being, with us this evening. Dr. Nisha Khanna, a mental health professional, joins us this evening. We'll also have Dr. Nimesh Desai, professor of psychiatry and director at IHBAS, and Salil Acharya, radio jockey at Radio City, also will be with us this evening. But I want to go across to Ritika Agarwal on, one thing that I feel is extremely essential is how we respond to a lot of these signs. And when we see somebody, Ritika Agarwal, when we see somebody who may not be doing okay, and we think they're simply being sad, or they just don't want to fight it out, that there is something wrong with their attitude, they just need to snap out of it. How detrimental is that as a response to somebody who may be undergoing depression?
So thank you for having me here, Tanvi. And so the thing is, when we say things like that, we tend to invalidate the other person's feelings and behaviors. So snap out of it also kind of suggests that it's something that is in the other person's control, and they're faking it, or they're putting on that act, which is not true. So in that sense, it can also lead sometimes to further guilt. It can lead to further feelings that I'm not being able to do what I should be able to do. I mean, I should, like a lot of my clients tell me that, we've tried everything, and, we've worked really hard, but yet everyone around us tells us we're not doing enough. So, that kind of disheartens them and makes them feel it can increase the feelings of hopelessness and helplessness around the situation.
Yes, and Dr. Marcus, for us to be able to help anybody, it's very essential that we know how to respond. And I think, before we go into the survey details and our findings, a quick word on how to respond when you do come across someone else, and not just your own case, someone else who may be going through depression.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. And firstly, let me congratulate your network for initiating a conversation like this. It's so important, particularly with what's going on with the pandemic and the lockdown and the manifestations of that. I think mental first aid is a critical piece of anyone's armory, as important as physical first aid. And it's something that should in fact be taught at school and at colleges at a young age for each of us. And I would suggest the first step in that process is just creating a safe environment for people to be able to express themselves. And obviously campaigns like this begin that journey. We really need to normalize the conversation around mental health. And something that I've been advocating for a long time is that it actually needs to be rebranded. When we think about mental health, it's often associated with negative thoughts. The very image in your head when I say that is probably with someone with their hand in their head in their hand, dark colors, a gloomy soundtrack, as we saw on the video. But if we think of physical health, it's the opposite. It's associated with uplifting and physical energy and light colors and vibrancy. I think we need to rebrand mental health and well-being so that it just becomes very normal and part and parcel of our conversation in society.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what we're going to dwell deeper into today. But I just want to tell our viewers that we also, to understand really the mindset of an urban Indian, to understand how many are aware, what are the problems they face if they want to reach out to someone, how do they perceive it if someone around them may be undergoing depression, or if they have gone through it, what did they face, how did they tackle it, what do they think really results in this or causes this or adds to their to their problems. So we put together a set of questions. We also refer to experts as we did that, and in association with Nielsen we carried out this survey, and we did this survey across 12 centers in the country. We surveyed about 2,440 people between the age group of 15 to 65. We covered cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, Kolkata, Hyderabad, Bengaluru, Jaipur. We also went to some, non-big metro cities. We went to Visakhapatnam, Bareilly, Guwahati, Raipur, Mangalore. And let me just first take you through some of the takeaways that we found, things that we thought were very interesting. And gradually, I will take you through more details. But when we asked people, what do you think is a biggest contributor to what impacts your own mental health? A lot of them said work. And it went from career as an important and a big contributor to their source of stress and happiness to their workplace environment. There was high awareness as well as optimism in smaller towns. Smaller towns seem to give an impression that while they do know about the problems, they are aware of it, but they are relatively better off mentally speaking than maybe some in big cities. Stigma around mental health became a very prominent thing, especially in the respondents from the affluent class. And that was very interesting to me, that even in the affluent class, there is a lot of stigma to talk about mental health. 76% of the respondents said that they're not open to talking to everyone about their mental health. Over 55 said they had at some point had suicidal thoughts, which is a significant number if you think about it. 28% people described, when we asked them what are the symptoms when you see somebody act in a certain way and you connect it to a mental health issue or to depression, what are those symptoms? 28% said gone mad. And that's a very troubling sign. Even if it is 28% and not 70%, it's still very troubling that that's the perception people have. 61% said they were unable to find reliable mental health professionals. That's the other worrying fact, which is why this conversation needs to happen, which is why governments need to focus a lot more on this, our institutes need to focus a lot more on this and ensure that we have accessibility. And 47% were unaware of government mandate for health insurance policies to cover mental health. I didn't know about it. I discovered when we actually carried out the survey and we were phrasing the questions, and I figured that, oh, it's mandated and it is covered in your health insurance. So, let's begin with the first talking point. These are the larger takeaways. Depression in today's time and age is considered a bigger issue amongst our respondents than poverty and illiteracy amongst the urban Indians. When we asked them what's plaguing India, well, unemployment, of course, was on top of that list with 74%. Corruption and fake news was next. And then came depression. Above poverty, 70% said depression is plaguing urban India. 68% then said poverty, work problems, stress, mental health, religious violence, suicide, illiteracy, body shaming, panic. All of them equally important. But this is how the people responded. So, if I had to go back to our experts and ask Dr. Nisha Khanna to help us understand when people say this, when a lot more people are actually saying that depression is plaguing India than the other issues. How do we see this? How do we read this as a message from urban India?
The basic thing is, especially during the COVID time, as you know, that economy also have a good hit. And as the career is also one of the major cause came out in your research also, as well as the secondary cause was the wealth. So you can correlate these features because one of the, as you talk about the urban India, we are in urban India when lots of people are there out of their towns and townships and I will say residing in the different cities, in the metro cities and where the expenses are very high. And especially in this lockdown, the economy has a bigger hit. So at this particular timing, it is the high time. Second thing, and this is what the time basically people have their particular lifestyle. Some people have planned there. If you talk about the COVID as impacted on this, and definitely as because we all have this career is the one of the major cause. Sometimes we choose the career, not we have the clarity about what we like to do. Sometimes we follow the career as our friends suggested, as our family told us to join the particular career, and all those reasons you can say it one. Third thing is that I feel like that left high self is not the thing which is not we people have been taught by our families, because we are in the habit of putting we as a together. We are not in the habit of putting ourselves as a persons. For example, in our families, mother is the person who will take care of the whole family. Father is the person who will take care of the financial things of the family. So the burden is like mother or fathers are taking, and kids are not that much of independent and that sort of that they can help it out. So I think so, like if you will say, I will not say that in abroad the depression is not higher in that case, but in India when I'm talking about that career or wealth is when coming out in the issues. So I am finding it out. Otherwise, Indian culture is like, if you are from a business class family, you have to join the family business. Now definitely the times are changing, but these are also one of the major causes is coming. Secondary thing is in metro cities, when you talk about urban India, you talk about people have connectivity issues. They don't have time. If the couple is working, if the family people are working, their timings are not matching. When they're coming home, traveling takes lots of times. In that timings, they are not getting that much of time to connect with each other. Either they have on 6 days working, or sometimes they have 5 days working. And then they have the backlog of their work, household work, managing the kids and spending time with families. They are not spending time on the recreational activities, how to connect on, share their heart it out. So the venting is not there, hobbies are not there. So all these things, as I said, that emotional connection is very required, where we will sit and talk about how you feel, what you have gone through in a day. So that sort of feeling, how much the people are you into your families and friends. Because in your research, I have even read it out that the people who are more comfortable sharing their things with the either with the friends, and then comes the family aspect.
Yeah.
So find it out, they are not getting the times for friends, when especially you talk about the urban India. So they are having bigger responsibilities on their shoulders, because the more you are getting the I will say money, the more responsibilities are there on your shoulders. As I said it, from different places, if people are traveling 2 hours traveling they are spending, or 3 hours traveling they are spending, and then they are tired, have to spend time with other members of the family. Along with that, they have to manage their own schedules. So they are not getting that much time to, I will say, rejuvenate yourselves. And sometimes they spend time with, like, for example, a couple is spending time together more, maybe not able to spend me time individually also. So it's like, it's a I versus me game is there. I always believe that if you are not, as a person is happy individually, you can't make happy your partner, you can't be happy in your work. And as I said it, the career wise, people are not following sometimes their passion, they are
Yeah.
doing it out of money needs. That is one of the issue is also coming up. So
Yeah.
I would say, even in relationship also, so people are not considering what they feel and what they want to. And that's why one of the people that people are sometimes not successful. So I also says emotions plays a very important role when you have to be successful in life. And that is one of the major reasons that people are more depressed and feeling sad, all helpless and hopeless,
Okay, let's
because
take it
of
point
these.
by point, and I just want to, also read out another interesting response and statistic that we got from this survey, and that is that 70% of the urban Indian respondents claim that they know they suffer or they know someone who has suffered from a mental health ailment. Now, that's I was actually surprised, Salil, with that number. Maybe it just goes on to show that people, at least in urban areas, are becoming a lot more aware, of the fact that either they are aware of something they may be going through, or at least they know of somebody and they've understood that this is a mental health issue. What is your own sense of, how in our lifestyles in urban cities, this is becoming essentially, I feel, a pandemic?
I will be able to answer your question there. One of the biggest issues that I feel that people have sort of not been able to understand, one of the biggest problems is social media. And in the urban world, the biggest problem is the pressure that social media has put. I remember doing this on radio also once. And most people, whether it was body shaming, which is part of your survey, whether it's peer pressure, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, most of the stigmas also that come are all because of social media. How many likes do you get? How many people are following you? What the other person is looking like? Even in the pandemic now, this Maldives phenomenon, the Goa phenomenon, that's actually sort of come up because everyone sort of feels that they've been left out, fear of missing out has sort of happened.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest reasons why people have now started to want to venture out, because they've seen somebody else going out. So they suddenly feel that they should go out. So they've forgotten some protocols and COVID precautions that they can take, which is why some cities have seen a greater rise now in the second wave. So when you look at it, most of it actually comes down with comparison, and it's inherent in every Indian. When you go back to school, if you got 70% and somebody next to you got 80%, you felt like you were useless. If somebody got 80% and 90%, look at the cutoffs today. The cutoffs are 99. I'm from Delhi University. I did economics honors from Venki. I mean, in my time, 20 years ago, when we got 88, we thought we'd done pretty well.
Yeah.
Today, I wouldn't even make it into the fifth list of most colleges. I remember that time when I didn't get to St. Stephen's and I felt really stupid because my mother said, "What? It doesn't matter. I mean, you can go to somewhere else and you can do other things." I remember becoming a radio jockey at that time, and people said, "Why would you do that and become a radio jockey? It doesn't pay." Now, 20 years later, these secondary, subjects or fields have become very useful. But again, when you go out there, even as radio jockeys, when you go out there, you see on social media, the actors have a larger following than, say, the radio jockeys. So radio jockeys now feel, okay, we should make digital content and look bigger because they're not coming to us. Why? Because the influencer marketing agencies say, you have these many followers, you are a category B influencer, and you are a category A influencer. Everyone is sort of slotted into categories. when you look at your depression rates, which have sort of increased because, where suicide becomes a large part, the definition of suicide mentally has changed over the years as well. Now they just want to throw in the towel. A lot of the times, clinical depression, medical depression can happen, but a lot of the times, a lot of the youngsters don't want to put in the hard yards as well. A lot of the in-between 30, 35 also, sometimes they feel that it's too much. The doctor was saying, there's a lot of pressure in the burden of responsibility increases with money, with traveling and all that. And that's why at the end of the day, you just say, I don't want to do this anymore. 30 years ago, there was no question about, I don't want to do this anymore, which is why divorce rates are higher today, because female and males, both of them are working as well. 30, 40 years ago, you didn't have women that were working in very good fields, that were making very good salaries, possibly more in urban India. A lot of women that I know make way more than what the men make,
Yeah.
So they're very independent, so they can take their own calls. So everything again, so there again, when they do that, then there'll be a lovely Facebook post that talks about how brave they've become and they've taken their move, right? But that sort of inspires another generation of people that have been influenced by social media. So
you've raised a very valid point. Salil, if I can just come in there and pick up on that and take it across to Dr. Nimesh Desai. Dr. Nimesh Desai, is it that, because of the lifestyles and the way generations have been brought up, they respond differently now than, like Salil said, 30 years ago when you didn't have an option? Or is it because 30 years ago people didn't know? And they just powered through whatever it was, and they told themselves this is nothing, and they just were not aware of it.
That surely, Tanvi, is one of the possible explanations for rural or urban India, or actually the world. But the fact is that the process of urbanization brings about huge amount of stress, loneliness and isolation, and the feeling of hopelessness that your survey finds. And so those are the hallmarks. As all of my colleagues have said, the hallmarks are feeling stress of day-to-day life, feeling isolated, feeling targeted. Social media only makes it worse. I must say, Tanvi, that last decade I led an ICMR project for 7 years that we ended in 2010. And it's amazing how that large scientific study findings are so mirrored by what you have found. So I must compliment you and Nielsen. Let me mention one more fact. When many of us were in schools, we were taught 80% of India lives in villages. That's no longer true. It's now 60-40, and by 2025, we are going to be 50-50. And so the issue of urban mental health is important within the field of mental health. What's also important, Tanvi, is that as your survey finds, and our scientific study report supports that completely, 7 or 8 people out of 10 who have a diagnosable, treatable mental health problem do not reach any mental health service. And the issue is of accessibility, awareness about where to go. In fact, I must break one myth. While stigma is an important issue, in urban India, stigma is, in our study, in a huge study, was ranked number 3. As your survey says, the issues for not reaching mental health service was 1, awareness about it being a mental health problem, 2, awareness about how to access. And so I'm quite with you that the government, the media, all of us need to actually make available more and more information. Let me add one more final thing to that. As Tanvi, you accepted so well that you didn't know about mental health insurance. I know many of us know. Now, for the last 2 years, mental health care by law is a right. The Mental Health Care 2017 actually posits mental health care as a right. Mind you, healthcare is not a right in this country yet.
Yes.
Mental health care is a right. And so this entire campaign that you are doing about increasing awareness, about getting people to talk about it, is actually complementing the legal provision beautifully.
Yes.
Especially in urban India.
They also said that, getting a suitable appointment time is difficult. Of course, a lot of people still don't want to talk about this with their friends or family members. And so getting the right time slot becomes very difficult in such times. And I'm sure, Ritika Agarwal, that became even more difficult during a lockdown and a pandemic in a year that we've just seen, where you don't have your own space. You are stuck inside for 4 walls with so many people around you. Where is the space to go and open up to a professional to talk to them or reach out to them?
Yeah, so this has been a huge issue actually with a lot of clients talking with family members being around, and therefore the kind of openness that we had in sessions prior to the lockdown and the sessions we have now, there's a huge difference between it. However, they have been able to actually explain to family that this is important. So some of them have managed to convince their families to stay out of their rooms. They've got the privacy that they require. For a lot of others, it has made it easier for them to access mental health, because now it's about making a call as compared to actually having to go to a clinic or a hospital or somewhere where you need to meet someone. So to some extent, that's also reduced the stigma, because it's just easier. I mean, I just pick up a call. As long as I have a space in the house, it does make it easier. There are a lot of people who also, when they're coming into the clinic, into a hospital, for example, now I'm at a hospital, so their concern is that what if someone sees us entering your clinic? Don't put up a name, don't put up a board outside your room.
Salil, I think, when you talk about urban India, and a lot of people still, tend to use these as descriptions, it's very reflective. It's reflective to, the biggest of the stories that have happened this year, where people's analysis of someone dying by suicide was to say, oh, but he looked very happy. Look at his pictures, look at his, recent videos. He seemed happy. How could it be depression?
When you go back to school, there were two words that were used for people. Some like me, they would say he's an extrovert. And somebody who didn't do much, he's an introvert. Some of those things you just mentioned are exactly what introverts used to do. Some of the kids in class, and this, you have to understand, it is not an older person syndrome. It is something that is there in schools, in classes, at the very base. And I remember so many children that were so quiet in school, that weren't into sports, that didn't make friends easily, that got a quiet tiffin and ate over there, and it's absolutely fine. Earlier, we didn't judge them. Today, you will judge them. Today, everyone's antlers are up, so they will actually give the, sort of jump into that space. The gentleman that you mentioned, Sushant, I've known him for a very, very long time, like so many from the industry. Different, right? Different thoughts, wrote differently. So everyone perceived the difference to be different. Even today, in our industry, the creative people, like when you say spaced out, so many of my friends are dreamers, musicians, they're dreamers. You look at A.R. Rahman sometimes, he will be looking at space and thinking about music. Now, just because he's a creative person, and they say that to creative people as well, they're never disciplined, they're never on time, they're never in schedule. These are all, like I said, all the little bits and pieces that have been fed into our brains over the years that we've grown up with. That's the reason why today schooling is also changing. When you go into IB schools today, my son is 3.5 years old, my daughter's 10 months. I've never used a TV in my house for the last 3.5 years. He learns how to count on his own. I don't force him to say 10 is 10. If he wants to say 10 is grass leaves of 10, it's a different style of education. You have got to start at the very base. And the understanding has to come from people like us. A radio is a medium where, without actually having any of the degrees of this esteemed panel, people will call up and share their closest stories with us. They can't be seen. So as one of the doctors mentioned, there's no stigma. I don't have to take their name. And they will pour their hearts out. They'll pour their hearts out about aggression with their families, husbands and wives having problems, sexual problems. All these issues will continue to happen. And, sometimes I don't have the answers to give to them. And I don't think any of us really have any answers. We just have to sort of like look inward and sort of allow us to just be like that. If somebody's feeling a little bit, I know that there is clinical depression and there's signs, and I've done we've done a huge survey on radio also with it, where there are certain signs, but I don't think that can happen with everyone. Today, if somebody's having a bad time, or it's that time of the month for somebody, if they're not in the zone that you think is comfortable and normal, you'll say she's mad or he's mad. He's neurotic. This neurotic word really pulls my strings, because I cannot understand, because this is what they've been taught. If agar ye alag hai, then she's different and he's different, and they're wrong. So I think schooling has to change. Earlier we used to talk about sex education in schools. Now I think they just need to tell people to be. You can grow in a different way. You do not have to be part of a factory production which we sort of become.
So here is the other aspect. We also ask people, who do you think you feel more comfortable talking to? Who's your safe haven for when you want to talk about what's plaguing you mentally or your own mental health issue? And 67%, an overwhelming 67% said friends and colleagues. That's the larger go-to. 55% said parents. Then a large percentage, 44%, also said their spouse or their partner, and that's their safe haven to go and talk about what they may be going through. Only 24% said mental health professionals. That is the other aspect. Dr. Desai, would you like to comment on that? Fair enough that step one may be to go to somebody you know, but when do people decide, at what point do they need to seek professional help?
Right. Let me connect that with what Salil and Marcus and you were discussing. Stereotypes is a huge problem. Stereotypes is a problem in a number of ways. One, it leaves out people who need help. It stigmatizes those who do not need to be stigmatized. I think we need to get to an area where all of us really realize that we might need help and we need help. I will take the liberty of saying that at least one of the 6 of us at the current time, only last 1 year, would have done with better help, professional help. And that's statistics. But to come to your point, yes, the first level help with friends and colleagues and family members is perfectly fine. What's important is for those who people reach out to, for them to recognize when you need a professional. If the disturbance is continuing for more than a couple of weeks, if the disturbance is out of proportion, if there are sleep or appetite disturbances, if there is gross dysfunction, most importantly, the moment there is talk about suicide or death, that's a red alert. And so I think what's important, Tanvi, from this first episode that you're doing is, if I might say, the next stage needs to be reach out. Not only talk about mental health, but reach out. Reach out for oneself, reach out to others. That bilateral reaching out and the demystification of persons who need mental health problem being somebody from Mars or Venus. That stereotype needs to be broken. It could be, and it well is, any one of us, anytime.
In the survey also, you think one common factor came out to be that people approach a family and friends first. So you have to understand, in India, level of awareness is very less. In older times, when there is any problem, we are so superstitious. We go to babas, we go to astrologers, we talk about, we can find out 100 other ways. But we are not approachable to a mental health professionals. One thing is that when you are having certain symptoms, like I think so Ritika also pointed out, that when we have any person have problems, they go to the family, they go to the friends, they share there is a problem, they say everything will be fine. You will be fine. Other person is not behaving. It is the other person's personality is like that. So when the thought process is such, when you are feeling different or stressed or low, I would say any person can go to a professional, because professional has also levels. I think so, because Salil in one of the conversation pointed out neurotic. Neurotic is a very common behavior for every human being. The concern is when it becomes psychotic. And because psychotic is this condition when person can think of a suicidal also, because psychotic is where required medications roles, psychotic is where required psychiatrist role, and people are not aware about what is neurotic. Neurotic is non-medical setting where counselors and psychologists can work it out. When you come to a psychotic behavior, it is the role of a clinical psychologist, and you can say further the psychiatrist can help in that. And sometimes I would say medication plays an important role in getting overcome the depression. But we have to understand, we need to be sensitized with the person. We have to talk about, if your family member and someone is like having those feelings, I'm there for you. If you are crying, it's okay to cry. Like the Ritika talked about, that it's okay to accept whatever you are going through. It's okay you are feeling lonely. Let it be. But if we can, we are a family member, our friends are there, we can highlight the good moments or memories you have spent with the person. You can create those moments with the person. Because in India, the emotional abuse, sarcasm, these concepts people are not aware about. dominance, people are not aware about. Even sometimes people comes into the clinic, visit my clinic, and they are not about sarcasm is out of anger. It is never out of love. But they says it is our behavior. In our families, everybody says like this, talked like this. We are born and brought up like this. And especially when I talk about emotional abuse, people are not aware what is emotional abuse. Degrading someone, you are zero, you don't know anything. Uh, uh, Mocking about someone, making feel guilty someone. So in India, especially when you talk about a woman, that women are not earning or not that much dependent, the male feel more dominating in that way. So that also plays an important role. Most of the women feels depressive symptoms. Why? This is one of the reason. And even the male, if male is joining a family business, male is working and one of the person of the family is more successful, the family compares, the jealousy feelings comes from the childhood itself, the comparison comes where the family, even the parents doesn't know what they are doing unknowingly. I think so that awareness level from the parents end is not there. Friends will say, okay, she's mocking about you, let it, you should mock it back. They don't know what they are exactly doing. I think so when the awareness level, that when the parents knew, when the families knew, when the friends knew, then they can talk about, okay, this is not my area, this is the expert area which you need to go across and take the help. The way he said it, be
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. In fact, because of what you raised, and you said that people don't know, and they subconsciously, unknowingly act in a way because they believe something. So we decided to also ask people about some of the myths that are around mental health, which they actually believe to be true, and we asked them to tick 2 of these. So when we wrote no reason to be depressed if one has a safe and secure life, 21% of the people chose that as their first option, and 47% people chose that as the second option. That's a large percentage of people who actually thought that if you are safe and secure, you have no reason to feel depressed. That's a myth. That's not true. Again, when we ask people, each mentally ill individual requires hospitalization, a large percentage of them, over 60% of them, actually believe this. This is a myth. Not everybody requires hospitalization. Many believe bipolar disorder is just a new excuse to get away with unpleasant and moody behavior. 39% collectively believe this is true. Over 50% believe people with mental health ailments are more aggressive and can harm people, can harm others. That's not true. There also is a struggle between differentiating what the mental health problem may be.
Oh, these and a lot more. You see, everyone on this panel is very qualified to speak on this subject except for me. So you have to understand that even I'm a very heightened, aware individual. They'll never understand it until it's actually becomes part of the curriculum. We need to have textbooks. My reaching out like this, you're all saying 1% is the conversion rate. I tell you, for COVID, it took so many months, and we still continue thinking about the fact they still can't differentiate between a cough and a cold and a COVID and a flu. It took 20 years to understand about AIDS. Now we have like the medication for it, but it took more than 20, 30 years. Philadelphia, the movie, if you've seen it. I mean, it was a stigma for years. And you think that we can fight mental health with a year and with a very big actor passing away? That's the reason why we're all talking about it today. That's the reason why, because on social media there's so much of chatter. It is going to take years and years. It's a long haul. For these percentages to change, you're looking at the next decade or maybe 2 for people to start looking at a different level of satisfaction in their lives. And then once they reach a different level of satisfaction, then rather than just looking at Facebook videos where say people leave their jobs and go out for a holiday for 1 year, they need to see the videos also about the people that have come back after that 1 year of holiday and realize what their lives were like.
Yes.
So the reality is going to be very different, which they will learn over a period of time. But if it is not part of the curriculum in schools, it is never going to change. Your depression will hit the minds that are slightly more, gullible or open to various thoughts are between 16 to 20, which is your highest viewing OTT audience. I do a podcast on Spotify. The average listening audience is 13 to 19. Yeah. They're listening to me and Chetan Bhagat and Sri Ravi Shankar talk. 13 to 19. It stops at 21. None of you all would know this. Can you imagine Then 90% podcast culture, radio culture is 13 to 19. So imagine the level that they've reached. So if it's their part of the curriculum and it's normalized, then only then we can win this battle. Otherwise, there'll just be debates and, discussions like this amongst people in their 40s and 30s and, yeah.
I get the point that you're making. Maybe next time we can have a podcast with you on this topic and get some of the experts, not you and me, because we won't be able to help them. But yes, in terms of conversation, and one point that you made, and you're right, a lot of people did start talking about mental health in the light of the Sushant case. But even there, look at the way a larger population responded. They almost did not want to believe that this could be a reason. Everything else in the world seemed possible. Everything else, including a high-profile double murder plot, which was plausible, and people bought that and were convinced about that, than to accept that somebody that you've seen so frequently on screen could actually be suffering from something that's not visible to us and that is not clear to us, and we are not able to understand. For me, that was one of the scariest aspects of the way we responded to that case. And so, yes, that made us feel that many more of these conversations are required across platforms, across age groups, and we will continue to do that here on Mirror Now. In fact, we've often had these conversations where we've opened up the phone lines and viewers have called us. Today we didn't do that, but we had so much of information that we wanted to share with everybody, so many of these findings that we wanted to share with everybody, which is why we had experts and we got you these survey reports. But I promise you that we will, in the coming weeks, have a lot more of these conversations. We will dwell deeper into what these survey findings show us and break it up into various aspects of mental health. And we'll open up the phone lines, have you participate as well. The idea is to continue with this conversation so that we can act now if we ourselves, somebody around us, needs help. Thank you so much for joining us on this special conversation.